I just want to make a short video about my annoyance with purity culture and like the ships that brought it into the African consciousness, the slave ships. Um, and really, this is inspired by the bashing of adornments and ornaments like waist beads, um, or body markings, or tattoos, piercings, or even clothing that like are really skimpy and show the legs, or are like crop tops and like show the tummies. Interestingly, when we look at the identities, cultural identifications of indigenous peoples to Nigeria, they all wore this. They wore waist beads and anklets and had all the things, the markings, as a sign of their cultural heritage, but then also their individualization away from the fold. This was a way to pick out and identify who they were. And it wasn't coincidence because these forms and modes of identification were also highly tied to their ways of life, their lifestyle. If a person lived by, or a community lived by the sea, then they would wear coral beads or wear cowries. If they lived by the farms, their identifications would be different, and close to like the forest, their identifications would be different. This was a way that people could recognize each other. And of course, these also carried serious spiritual significance because our identities are always connected to our ideation of who we are as vessels of Creator. Then are always also formats of interceding and communing with the divine. So things like colors that were worn, or clothes that were worn during certain seasons, were all significators. Special markings made by the medicine people or the babalawos was all also spiritual significance of spiritual significance. And so these are things that are tied to our heritage as Nigerian people, which I guess was even before we were given the name and title Nigerian, you know. But we wore the animal clothings and coverings, and we wore the feathers, and we wore the skin and the husks, because if our tribe was, say, in a certain area or a mangrove that had certain types of animals, if they came to us, or we sort of engaged in this symbiotic relationship where they would offer themselves to us and we would use them for food or for clothing, whatever, or for medicine, then we would wear, these the residue from the animals as a way to signify that we have in some way blended or are blending with the energies of the animal. So ancient African civilizations and cultures and traditions were highly eco-spiritual. Our formats and modes of identification were highly tied to the lands that we lived on and were inspired by the nature spirits and all of that, the story, the culture, the myth. So when purity culture comes and religion comes and tells me that wearing the waist bead is demonic, what I'm hearing is that you're telling me that my African consciousness is demonic and that my ancestors are demonic. And when you tell me that wearing anklets is demonic, or that showing my tummy in a crop top is sinful, or that getting tattoos is a sin, what you're telling me is that my ancestors are sins and are sinners and are sinful beings, and my culture and heritage is sinful. And so basically what you're doing is that you are brainwashing me, adulterating me and my consciousness away from my roots. Because now, if I identify my roots, my original heritage, as sinful and demonic, then I want nothing to do with that. And so I strive to be this pure perception, creation, inspired, and, or that inspires to, the personification of perfection of the slave master that tells me that, I am a sin and I am demonic. And so now I put away everything. I stop communing with the land. I stop communing with my body. I want my body to look a different way. I want to communicate a different way. I want to be seen a different way. I want nothing to do with my roots. It's interesting. My mother keeps saying that their culture is Christ, their culture is Christianity, and so there is no tie or relationship or connection to the original culture. So of course the children can't speak the language, and of course the children don't go to visit the village, and of course when the land is left bereft and untended to, unnurtured, and there isn't a relationship between the land and its inhabitants who are supposed to be its keepers, then of course the predators come in and then they steal the resources, like they do in my mother's village in Ijo, in Brass local government, inhabited by the Ijo people. And the waters turn black with soot and leaked crude oil, and the people are unable to fish. And the big giant corporations, oil corporations, become richer, and the people become more impoverished and are forced to leave their land altogether. And the land is forced into a source of decay and is taken over by these other people who just want to harvest its life force. And so people who are told that their heritage are demonic are people who have no access to their land, who have no say, who lose the relationship to it. And so eventually, if in my consciousness I am forced to leave my consciousness, my original identification and heritage, in order to become something, then eventually, of course, I'm also going to leave the land that I live on. And I aim for a different land that is pure, unlike the devilish, hellish one I'm on. And what happens when all the children of the land leave? Well, the aliens, the predators, the actual demons, the actual devils come in and feast. And feast and feast and feast and feast. Feast and degrade the land to crumbs. And the guy is, the children who left the land to this other pure land actually never even thrive, really, because they're cut off from who they are. And so they're sort of lost, lost at sea, without an anchor. So now they continue to seek for saviors to help them out of their hellhole which they're in. But they don't realize that the actual savior that they need is that return to self, that identity, resurrecting that, celebrating that resurrection so that they can come back to their land and take up their true place and purpose as keepers of that land, as the stewards of that land, and then actually begin to benefit from the land's riches and abundance instead of being at odds and at war with themselves and absolutely spiritually impoverished, no matter how hard they try, no matter how hard they try, no matter how much money they think they have, they're never full. And that's just because, there's the divisiveness, a division within the consciousness. And unless there is a harmony and a union that ties them back to their roots and their truth, they're always going to be the glass is half full, no matter where they go.